Hi everyone, I'm Chike Cohen, that's Sanford Hess, and this is Rural Reviews Rewind, the show where we rewind the clock to look back at some of the movies of yesterday. This week we're going to be talking about two movies that really have everything and nothing to do with each other, in the sense that they're both about the origin story of one of the two famous pop culture icons of all time.
Who both wear masks.
Some on the outside, some on the inside. In both cases, our first film is going to be Purple Rain, starring Prince, directed by Albert Magnoli, and the second film is going to be Batman: Mask of the Phantasm. This is a sequel to last week's slight conversation on the fact that he had never seen Batman: Mask of the Phantasm, and I had never seen Purple Rain, so...
You hadn't?
No.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Had never seen Purple Rain, and that's courtesy of the manager of Big Grove Tavern and the chef de cuisine, Raul Parada. They invited me out to go see this film on a whim, and I said, yeah, why not? Because it was playing at the Virginia this past week. So let's start off with Purple Rain, directed by Albert Magnoli, starring Prince, Apollonia, and
Morris Day.
Morris Day.
Gotta give Morris Day some credit there.
Yeah, Morris Day gets a little bit of credit. So this film is about the kid, a musician who's in a rising band called The Times?
The Revolution.
The Revolution. And the other band is The Times. And he is basically trying to work his way up in this club. Problem is, he has a rival called The Times, where Morris Day's lead singer is singing Jingle Love and trying to get all the best dancers and all the best singers in order to push the kid out of the limelight, out of the main spot. The kid has two very interesting band members who happen to be lesbians who have written an amazing song that Prince won't listen to because he's self-centered. Along the way, he meets a woman that he is deeply attracted to but doesn't really give the time of day part of the time, named Apollonia, who came to the city with aspirations of being a dancer and a singer. She's offered some help from the kid, and is also offered help from the other rival. And it's basically about that dynamic, as well as the kid's songwriting process and his difficulties at home. For me, this film is superb in the sense that the music tells the story as much as the actual story tells the story. And it's one of those things where they don't tell you, they show you all the way through in both cases.
Like what? Give an example.
When Prince, or the kid, is trying to tell Apollonia how he feels, he does so through a song. I'm forgetting.
Oh, when she comes when he's up on stage and she walks in and he changes to a different song?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that. Beautiful Ones is the name of the song.
Yeah.
And he's using it both to flirt and to put himself emotionally bare out there for her. And she's so both moved by the performance and saddened by it that she leaves after the performance. So you have correlations like that. You also have the final song, Purple Rain, that has to deal with Prince's father, or the kid's father, who, spoiler alert, because this movie is over 20 years old.
It's safe. It's actually closer to 35 years old.
35 years old. Is hospitalized due to a self-inflicted suicidal gunshot wound.
Right.
Because he doesn't feel like he could ever be a good enough man, and then the kid finds these compositions that his father wrote where he never got his due, and sees the tortured artist the kid himself is now replicating. So I really do love the whole circle back, because throughout the film the kid almost starts to become his father while defending his mother from his father's abuse.
Right.
So there are interesting parallels there, and especially in how he treats Apollonia throughout the film.
Right.
What do you think of Purple Rain? How do you view the film, Sanford?
So I saw this movie, maybe not when it first came out, but soon after it came out. I probably saw it again a couple of years ago, and then I just watched it this past week, with sort of fresh eyes. The best reason to watch this movie is what you mentioned already, which is the music scenes.
Yeah.
I mean, seeing Prince performing at the height of his powers is, I mean, you forget, people who've never maybe seen this or seen performances of Prince. He was a fabulous musician, multi-instrumentalist, but in most of this movie he's playing guitar and some piano. Mm-hmm. He was an amazing dancer. I mean, there's parts of this movie where he's doing his best James Brown. I mean, I'm always impressed with the way somebody can go down on the splits and pop back up.
Yeah.
Especially doing it in like those 3-inch boots.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He has tons of charisma on stage.
Yeah, he does.
Although that doesn't carry to his offstage character.
Correct.
So to me, and plus the time,
Mm-hmm.
you got to see the time. I just love their performances. The two performances that they have are both relatively short.
Yeah.
But to me, are two of the highlights of the movie. And Morris Day's character is just fun.
They're highlights in a ridiculous sense.
Well, they bring a little levity to it. This movie's kind of heavy.
It is. It's very heavy. And Morris Day's character definitely does bring the levity when we're talking about his performances. Just the way he speaks. The man speaks like a pimp.
Yes.
And
dresses like a pimp.
And dresses like a pimp. And pays for things like a pimp.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'll buy that, but not that. And then
keep the change. Go get the change.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love the interaction between him and Jerome.
Yeah.
The guy, his little valet guy. I just love the Who's on First scene.
Yeah.
They come up with the code word,
which is
being
what?
Yeah, that's a great scene.
Yeah, it's kind of great, and I did catch the little metaphorical jab. Who's on first?
Yeah.
Like, what's the code word? What's the code word?
Yeah.
What?
Okay. No, yeah.
No, okay to the word what? So you're gonna tell me what when she gets here? I'm gonna say what? What do you mean what? Oh, what's the code? Yeah, it's so great.
So to me, those are the best reasons to watch this movie. Now, the reasons not to watch this movie is, the acting is painful. I'm sorry, but But let me. I mean, to defend the movie, it was made with Prince's actual band.
Yeah.
They did hire Apollonia as a, she was kind of a late addition because he was dating another singer who actually was his girlfriend and she toured with him. She dropped out. Vanity was her name. So she dropped out and they did some cold calls and they found Apollonia. But pretty much everybody else, The Time, the Revolution, all play themselves. His parents are professional actors, and his dad probably delivers
the most heartbreaking scenes in the movie.
Yeah, and kind of one of the better performances. I mean, he's sort of that's a very tough thing to be an abusive father, an abusive husband, and yet come off as a kind of sympathetic character.
Yeah, that guy had the most thankless role in history, I would think.
Right.
Because of having to play with all those dynamics and still having to kind of make it seem genuine. Like, the mother had no acting skills at all.
Right.
No offense.
And her character was nothing. There's nothing to her character that made you say, I understand where she's coming from, I understand why she stays with this guy, or anything. Mm-hmm. None of that. But I blame the script for that.
Yeah. And I will say the only other thing that really bothered me was, like, the random nude scene.
Yeah.
That was kind of not my bag. I was just like, no.
Yeah. That's probably Prince's suggestion.
I hope not. I really hope you had more common sense than that, Prince. No offense intended.
Yeah, I did a little reading about this one last night. I thought this was interesting, is that there was a script that was sent to Prince.
Mm-hmm.
He liked the script, or, sort of accepted it. And then they had a hard time finding a director. So then they brought this director in, Albert Magnoli, and he didn't like the script.
Okay.
So he rewrote it himself.
Oh, no.
And apparently the original script was darker. So I'm kind of like, how do you, how do you make this movie? I guess you cut out the comic interludes.
You cut out the comic interludes, you start it from childhood, and then show him using music as an escape, I would think would be the route I would take. I'm not even a screenwriter, and that's my best shot at it.
So on that one, it's like, wow, but the script, it's tough because, obviously the reason to make this movie at the time and the reason to appreciate this movie now is the live performances. Yeah. So probably a third of the movie is live performances.
Which he did do live. Let's just point that out.
Oh my God. The live performances are amazing.
He did do it was played with the backing track, but he did perform them live. So
I have no problem understanding that because he's so fabulous in them. I mean, he really is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that being said, this movie has long stretches where I just kind of was like, oh, God, I'm not emotionally invested in these characters. I don't like Prince as a person. I don't understand what Apollonia sees in him. I don't understand, the dynamic of these women and these men. I did like you mentioned, though, this sort of idea that he was paralleling his father. And you could see there was some decent acting in this part where he was sort of recognizing his own, his violence.
And it happens once or twice before it really clicks with him, which makes it more believable. It's not like, oh, I did this and I feel bad. It's like, no, I want to be at the top. And his band is basically telling him, you can't be at the top without having support from other people.
Right.
And it's until he, potentially loses his father that he realizes that.
Right. So, I mean, I guess what I would want to see, if I could go back in time and make suggestions to them, this movie should have had more of a story arc. Because the story arc is kind of, Prince is already popular, he meets this girl, he is maybe losing his touch a little bit. Nope, he's got his touch back. That's the plot of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, the stuff with his dad goes on.
Well, I'm going to counterpoint that, which is, think about the era it's made in. It's made in 1984.
Yeah.
What is the most famous about movies made from that time period? They're quick to get to start, climax, resolution. They don't really care about the in-betweens, the details. It's muddied unless you're looking at an Oscar pick, which this one was never going to be.
Right.
So in that sense, the story needed to be as simple as possible for the music to have the effect it had.
Well, and it's, let's be honest, it was also kind of a cash-in movie. It's, hey, let's put Prince on the, it's like Elvis or the Beatles. Let's put him in a movie and make some money. And to a certain extent, that comes through. I guess the last thing that I would say about this, to me, watching this again, well, first of all, it is kind of fun to see the fashions. That's an era that
has everything.
Yeah, well, it's just, you see the people in the crowd scenes, the way they're dressed with the makeup and the hair and all the stuff that they're wearing. It was the movie is very much set in 1984.
Yeah, very much. But it is a good film. It's something that I can recommend for those who are 17 and up.
Yeah,
I don't think people younger than that could actually appreciate the brilliance of Prince or the simplicity of the story.
Right.
I do like it, though, and I do recommend it for people, especially if they want to discover who Prince was as an artist.
Well, that's right. If the only perception you have of Prince is some weird guy... Chewy. Is what?
Chewy! All the noises and the weirdness.
I don't know that one.
I mean, just like... You think of Prince and you think of all these, weird notes he would hit.
Oh, okay.
And so, that's the first thought people have of Prince. Man playing his guitar and then, the way he says kiss,
Oh, I see.
So I think that throws people off. But if you really want to know how phenomenal of an artist this man was, Purple Rain is a good starting point. And then after that, directly search Prince acoustic, and then you get a small slither of why this man was so beloved in Minneapolis and worldwide.
Well, one more thing I read about when I was kind of doing a little reading on the background. So the director went out and he met Prince in Minneapolis.
Right.
And he said, hey, well, I'd like to put some, here's some of the music you might want to put in the movie. Prince had 100 songs ready.
Yeah.
I mean, music just flowed out of him. So he was, and Purple Rain wasn't even the batch of 100 songs that apparently he went to a performance sort of during that time where Prince was performing, and he heard the song, and Prince was like, oh yeah, we just wrote that. He's like, oh, that's awesome. So, I mean, Prince is one of those guys who music just flowed out. I mean, there's still hundreds of songs that have never been released from Prince, or dozens at least. The quality of the stuff, and also, to me, the variety of the songs in this movie. The music is all over the place, yet it's all performed live on stage. Mm-hmm. So, it's also an example of going back and seeing that, not only were they an amazing band, but a stage show. I mean, I love the parts when they're moving in synchronicity, the guitarists and stuff like that. It's simple stuff, but it is pretty cool. Although I gotta throw out the misogyny.
Oh,
I'm so aware of it now.
Ah, jeez.
The casual misogyny, whether they're dumping the woman in the dumpster and just kind of laughing about it, or what really got to me with when Prince is having his solo, and then Wendy or Lisa, whoever plays guitar, was kneeling in front of him and simulating, sex acts.
Yeah.
And I was just like, you don't need it. It just, it wouldn't. It's just the kind of thing. It stands out as such an anachronism.
The ridiculousness of that, and
And that being said, doesn't take away from the man's genius.
Doesn't take away from it at all, and it's definitely worth a watch. So the other film I wanted to cover today is another form of an origin story, and that comes in the form of Batman: Mask of the Phantasm. I purposely said that like the trailer did because it's just so left field from what the movie actually represents. This movie premiered on December 25th, 1993, I believe.
That's what it said.
And here, for me, this movie is directed by Eric Radomski and Bruce Timm, the seminal minds behind the entire DC animated universe, which included, but isn't limited to, Batman, the animated series, Superman, the animated series, Justice League, Batman Beyond, Justice League Unlimited. These minds gave us the voices of the superheroes of the 90s, who are still so prevalent today that no other voices will be used in video games, in popular culture. No one thinks of Batman without thinking of Kevin Conroy first, because his voice is that noticeable. So the story for this film revolves around Batman and a mobster who gets a little time but not a lot, voiced by Abe Vigoda, who is being chased by the Angel of Death known as the Phantasm, who is slowly and carefully taking out all the mob bosses of Gotham City because the Phantasm says sins have been committed and you must pay for the crimes. Of course, Batman's on the case and trying to find out who this Phantasm is.
And the Phantasm kind of looks like Batman.
Kind of looks like Batman.
So people think it is Batman.
Right. And it turns out that, I'm not going to spoil that yet. So Batman's on the case trying to find out who this Phantasm is. And the police are saying, because this person looks like Batman, we're going to go after Batman. Meanwhile, Batman's original love, Andrea Beaumont, comes into the picture, back into Gotham City to, they didn't really make it clear, but be a socialite, be a social justice warrior.
I guess she's from there, she's back, she's visiting,
Right.
Who knows?
Right.
So was she in other parts of the series?
No.
Okay, so
This
you
was
say
a-
it like his true love, but I was
Yeah.
never heard of her character before.
No, she was not a part of the series. She was specifically invented for the movie, voiced perfectly by Dana Delaney, who later voiced Lois Lane in Superman, the animated series. So essentially, Bruce and Andrea reconnect, and you also get moments from Bruce's past when he is starting to realize that his calling may be to be a Caped Crusader.
Right, I think that's an important point, is that in the sort of flashback sequences, he met her when he was a young man.
Yes,
And
in his 20s.
Yeah, and like you said, was sort of starting to get into this Batman thing.
Persona.
Yeah.
He first starts out with the ski mask and realizes
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
the things that he's using aren't going to quite cut it, but he's not really fully who he needs to be yet. And at the same time, he's falling head over heels for Andrea. And he has to make this important choice. Do I choose Andrea, or do I choose this crusading life helping the city?
And I think it's really was a highlight of the film to me, is that they tied that into his relationship to his parents, who were murdered, obviously,
Right.
and when he was young, and actually made you understand where that conflict was coming from because of the guilt that he felt about his parents.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a lot of guilt, and it's a lot of trying to understand who you want to become, and I think that's something that parallels Purple Rain very well.
I love the tie-in. That's great.
And so, for me, this movie was a seminal classic. Not only because you're watching Batman do Batman-related things, but there's an emotional core to it that really sets other interpretations of the character apart. Forget Christopher Nolan's Batman Dark Knight trilogy. Forget Adam West, God rest his soul, 1966 TV series.
Yeah.
This was the version of Batman we all wanted that could be both serious and emotionally relevant. And over the decades that this movie has been around, this film still stands the test of time as probably the best Batman movie. You also get the Joker in on some of the action. And for those who don't know, I'm about to blow your minds. The Joker was voiced by the one and only Mark Hamill. For those of you who don't know who Mark Hamill is the actor who, for the last 30 years, is most well known for playing Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, A New Hope, Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, Star Wars, The Return of the Jedi, and now Star Wars, The Last Jedi. So, yes, that man who has been the hope and savior for all also played the most evil interpretation of the Joker ever put to screen.
Yeah, his Joker is fabulous. I mean, there's just no doubt about that. He's funny, he's scheming, he's got that weird cackle, but you can understand everything he says.
Yeah.
It's great. It's great.
So what are your impressions of the movie? Because I know you're not that big of a fan of TV series, which this is based on, and animation in general.
Okay, no. I'm a big fan of animation.
Okay.
I did not. The TV series came on at the wrong time of my life.
You were in college by that point, I'm sure.
I was working. I didn't. Yeah. So I didn't see Batman the animated series. But I would say this, that to me, this is a great example of what the peak of a superhero movie could be before we rolled into the late 90s when we began this massive superhero movie process.
Do you think this is what movies in modern times that are superhero films are missing?
The emotional core to this movie that you mentioned is exactly what they're missing usually. It works so much better when you have something that ties you into the character and it's not just fight scenes. So let me say this. This is an example of why Batman is my favorite DC character, is because he's interesting. He's conflicted. He's, in this movie, and I was surprised because I had never heard this sort of storyline with this woman that he fell in love with, but I was very intrigued by the relationship that they had, and you really, you felt for him. You were like, oh, hey, Bruce Wayne's really found somebody he can be with. And then, oh, that's right, it's Batman, and something bad's going to happen because bad things always happen to Batman, and he's just this really dark dude.
And let's also add in that Andrea Beaumont has her own special set of martial arts skills.
Yes.
Because her dad forced her to do karate lessons when she was like 10 or 13.
So do you want to go there for a moment, plot-wise?
Let's just go there.
All right.
The big surprise in this film is the fact that the Phantasm is, let's say it all together, Andrea Beaumont.
Didn't see that one coming.
No, not at all. And when the motivations of Andrea Beaumont are made clear,
yeah,
that's when the movie goes up a level, because you're like, that makes complete sense knowing what I know about you.
Yeah, I agree. So since we've already spoiled that part, and again, this one's 25 years old, she is essentially seeking revenge for her father against the people who, sort of screwed her father over on these mob deals.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense why she's doing this. It makes sense who she's targeting. They have sort of explained her abilities to do that. And that leads to this great, sort of conflict between her and Batman. As it's a lot like the second Batman movie that Tim Burton did.
Yeah, Batman Returns.
Yeah, with Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a relationship where they're out of their costumes,
mm-hmm.
and then they have a relationship where they're in their costumes. and you kind of want them to figure it out. But again, it's Batman. Bad stuff happens, so they don't really get it going. And, and I like that. I like that this movie didn't wrap up with a nice shiny bow and a happy ending. It was better and more consistent with the character that it doesn't.
Yeah. And I think the one thing we've not mentioned is something we mentioned a lot of in our previous review of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the animation.
Yeah.
They did something very special for Batman the Animated Series, which is they painted the entire show on black, dark paper, giving a very neo-noir look to the series itself, and something that they call, I believe, Dark Deco.
That's cool.
Which
Dark Deco, I like that.
Which is a play on Art Deco.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just the opening sequence, the credits
of the skyscrapers.
Yeah,
and
it's beautiful.
And you've got to also think about the movement of the camera, because we're talking about animation here, and it's filmed with such a steady hand.
Yeah.
In the way that they move the animation, that the opening scene alone, where Batman busts through a gangster's mob meeting, is classic Batman. And there's one thing that I really love about the series and the movie itself, and you'll never guess what it is. The way he disappears and reappears. Somebody will be mid-sentence with him and he'll be gone.
Which you can do in animation. I guess you can do that in live action too.
They tried to do it in the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, which I appreciated. But, he's always this unstoppable force. And I really love that about this character. And the way they showed him both progress and regress, much like the kid in Purple Rain, was what made the movie a masterpiece for me. Did you enjoy this movie enough to call it an animation masterpiece, as you did Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse? Or is it not quite there for you?
I would not say it is a masterpiece. I have two knocks against it. One is it's just too short. I mean, this was a movie that left me wanting more.
Okay, can I address that?
Sure.
This was originally supposed to be a direct-to-video movie.
Okay.
And they rushed it to theaters after they realized they wanted the film to be given a wider base.
Yeah, it's like 70 minutes. So.
But they rushed it to a point where there was no possible way it was ever going to get an audience.
Right. So the other thing for me about the animation is that it is consistent with the TV series in its style, which is a knock, because the TV series was probably done on a very quick basis and very simple sort of animation. So I kind of wish that they had treated this not as a, like you said, if they had done it more as it's not just going to be a direct-to-video. This is going to be a theatrical film. Let's take the animation up a notch. Doesn't have to change substantially, but it was a little rudimentary in the animation side.
See, now I have to dock you on this one, because that's not at all true, because I know the animation house they used. They used a Tokyo Animation Studio for all of their animation that they had done, which is the highest standard of that day. So if it's bad, it's not because the animation itself was poorly made, it's just because of the resources of the time.
Well, I think it is also, again, they're being consistent with the TV show. And you're not going to spend as many resources doing all the really fine work on the TV show. It's more about how much time they invested. Not the skill of the animators, just the time they invested.
I'm going to counter you one more time and tell you that they used a full orchestra for every single bit of the soundtrack for Mask of the Phantasm and the TV series itself. But this is obviously a passion and a love for me. This is not so much a draw for you. There's something I will talk to you about off air regarding Batman Mask of the Phantasm.
Ooh, I've got one back for you.
Okay, what you got?
Well,
quickly.
Well, very quickly is that there's no explanation of how she disappears and reappears. The car drives right through where she was. They never answered that. How does that happen?
I don't know. We'll
talk about that off the air.
We'll talk about that off the air and a few other things. But we'll see you guys in about 2 weeks. I know we're coming up close to Oscar season, so we'll probably have a show on that or something based around that in the near future. Until then, we'll see you at the movies. Bye, guys.